All right, let's talk about one of the weirdest wars in American history, the War of 1812. You might have heard it called the Second War for Independence, but honestly, the reality was so much messier. This was a conflict that almost ripped the brand new nation apart right from the get-go. And the way it ended? Well, it almost makes no sense.
Okay, just to give you an idea of how bizarre this whole thing was, picture this. What if a country's biggest, most famous victory, the one that makes a national hero, the one that everyone remembers, what if that battle happened after the war was already over? Like 2 weeks after? Sounds crazy, right? Well, with the War of 1812, that is exactly what went down.
So before the US could even think about taking on the British Empire, it had a huge problem at home. I mean, the country was split right down the middle, just bitterly divided on whether they should even be fighting this war. It was basically a war within a war.
And the absolute epicenter of this opposition? New England. You had these war hawks in Congress chomping at the bit to fight, but the Federalist Party, especially up north, was having none of it. And we're not talking about just some quiet complaining here. Oh no, they actually organized a formal meeting, the Hartford Convention, to basically make their opposition official. So, why were they so dead set against it? Well, you can probably guess. It came down to money, simple as that. The entire northern economy ran on shipping and trade, so a war with Great Britain, the biggest naval power on the planet, that wasn't just some political squabble. For them, it was a direct shot at their wallets. For all those merchants and ship owners, war meant one thing: the British Navy shutting down their ports and putting them out of business. Total economic ruin. I mean, they took it so far they even tried to change the Constitution to limit the president's power to declare war in the first place. But here's the thing, actively opposing a war while your country's in the middle of fighting it, that is a huge political risk. And when the war ended with this big surge of patriotism, well, that gamble backfired. Big time. The Federalists got painted as traitors, and their party, it pretty much just vanished.
So, with the country barely holding it together, the war itself kicks off. And for the young United States, it was just this brutal trial by fire. I'm talking one humiliating defeat after another. But then, punctuated by these incredible moments of defiance that would literally define the nation.
And this thing was fought everywhere. You had naval battles way up on the Great Lakes, fighting down through the center of the country all the way to the Gulf Coast. It was just this sprawling, chaotic mess of a war. And at first, believe it or not, the Americans actually had some surprising wins, especially up on Lake Erie. But then, everything changed. See, way over in Europe, Britain finally defeated Napoleon. Now that's great for Britain, but for the US, it was the worst possible news because it meant the entire undivided, unstoppable military machine of the British Empire could now turn its full attention to them.
And yeah, the British did not hold back. In August of 1814, they marched right into Washington, D.C. and burned the White House to the ground. The Capitol, too. It was the absolute rock-bottom moment of the war. But then, just a few weeks later, the British fleet sails up to Baltimore. They're thinking, this is going to be easy. But at a place called Fort McHenry, the Americans just refused to give up.
And get this, there was an American lawyer, a guy named Francis Scott Key, who was actually being held on one of the British ships. He had a front row seat to the whole thing, this 25-hour-long bombardment. And his description of it just perfectly captures the terror. He said, "It seemed as though Mother Earth had opened and was vomiting shot and shell in a sheet of fire and brimstone." Wow. So imagine this. After a full day and night of non-stop cannon fire, the sun finally comes up. And through all the smoke, Francis Scott Key looks out and he sees the American flag. The huge one, still flying over the fort. They hadn't surrendered. The defense had held. And seeing that, right then and there, inspired him to write a poem he called The Defense of Fort McHenry. Today, of course, we know it as the Star-Spangled Banner. Okay, so that brings us right back to where we started, the absolutely bizarre ending of this war. A peace treaty gets signed in Europe, but news traveled at the speed of a sailboat back then. And because of that slow communication, there was one last legendary battle still left to fight.
The timing here is just mind-boggling. On Christmas Eve, 1814, diplomats from both sides are in Belgium, and they signed the Treaty of Ghent. The war is officially over. But that news has to cross the Atlantic Ocean. So 2 weeks later, on January 8, 1815, nobody in America knows this, and the biggest battle of the entire war is about to go down near New Orleans.
Yeah, nobody in Louisiana got the memo. A huge British force is getting ready to attack the city, and who's in charge of defending it? A super tough, seen-it-all general named Andrew Jackson. And the army he puts together is something else. It's this wild mix of frontiersmen, pirates, regular soldiers, a total ragtag crew.
And the result? It was one of the most lopsided victories you'll ever see. The Americans just crushed the British attack. The final numbers are just staggering. The British had over 2,000 casualties. The Americans, only 7. 7. It was an unbelievable, stunning victory.
Now, let's be clear. From a military perspective, this battle meant zero. Zilch, the war was already done. But psychologically, it meant everything. Because news of Jackson's incredible victory hits the rest of the country at pretty much the same time as the news about the peace treaty. And so, in people's minds, the two events just blurred together. It created this powerful story, this myth, that America had won the war with one final heroic knockout punch.
So, if the war was technically a tie, a draw, what was the real takeaway? What did this whole strange conflict actually achieve for the United States? Well, officially, the outcome was nothing. Seriously, the Treaty of Ghent didn't give anyone new land, it didn't really solve the problems that started the war in the first place, it was basically a giant reset button. The official term is status quo ante bellum, which is just a fancy way of saying, let's just put everything back to the way it was before we started fighting.
Now, the economic hit, especially for those northern states, was absolutely real. Exports and imports plummeted. But there was a really unexpected silver lining. With the British Navy blocking all their ports, the U.S. couldn't buy British goods anymore. So they had no choice but to start making stuff for themselves. And this forced self-sufficiency actually kicked off a huge boom in American manufacturing. It really laid the foundation for the country's industrial future.
But in the end, the biggest, most important outcome of this war wasn't about land or money. It was a feeling of pride, of nationalism that just swept across the country. Think about it. They had survived a second war against the most powerful empire in the world. The country felt more together, more confident than it ever had before. And this kicked off a whole period that historians actually call the era of good feelings.
So that leaves us with one last thing to think about. On paper, the treaty says the War of 1812 was a draw, a tie. But for a brand new country that came this close to falling apart, that got rid of a major political party, that created its own national anthem, and came out the other side with this powerful new sense of who they were, well, you have to ask. Maybe sometimes a draw can feel an awful lot like a win.